Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. Project we've got going on today, I need to do some maintenance on this tractor you see behind me. I've got a exhaust leak that's been going on for quite a while. I have to make a new gasket and seal up the junction between the exhaust pipe and the exhaust manifold coming out of the engine block. But as concerning, if not more so, due to the cost of fuel right now, I've got a fuel leak on the bleeder boss of the fuel filter. And what's happened, I mean, this is an old tractor and I bought it used, and it looks like somebody has kludged together a bleeder screw and it's cracked that filter housing over time, and it's just pouring diesel fuel everywhere. So we're gonna have to pull that off and replace it. Start out, first thing we're gonna have to do is pressure wash this thing, so one, I'm not working in a nasty mess, and two, I can see for sure that that's the only leak I've got when I go to fix it. And I'll bring you in here and show you what the problem is here in just a minute. It's kind of windy today, and since I'm going to be pressure washing, I don't want to get out the clip-on microphone and end up getting it soaked with water. So you know, might have a little bit of wind noise. This is our exhaust leak. You can see the soot coming out. It's all over the oil filter. What's happened over time, this gasket has let go, so I'm going to have to disconnect this collector pipe from the manifold, drop it down, and I've got some exhaust gasket material. I'll have to make a new gasket and put that back in there. And you can see from the mess all over the engine, that dirt and dust and everything collected on it. The diesel fuel's just been spraying everywhere. You can see how wet it is down here. But what's happened, there is a crack in this boss right there vertically. And when I pulled that bleeder screw out to see what the problem was, that's just an SAE bolt that somebody has wedged in that thing, and it split that housing out. So I'm gonna have to replace it. And I don't know if y'all are curious or not, but this is my pressure washer. It's a Simpson 3600 PSI power shot. I got a pretty good deal on this thing at Tractor Supply. One of the reasons I got it is it's got a Honda motor on it. The last pressure washer I had some kind of, well, not Honda, and it was terrible. And getting this out for the first time this spring, you know, everything ought to be good to go. And if y'all have a pressure washer that you put into storage and don't use very much, this stuff right here, this Stabil pressure washer pump protector, is fantastic. You know, you put it on there and flush the system out, and it lubricates everything inside so you don't end up with corrosion from leaving water sitting there, but also it lets you flush it out in the wintertime and keeps your pump from freezing if you're storing your pump in a not environmentally controlled environment. All right, it's the next day after I got started doing the pressure washing yesterday. I was already greasy and nasty, so I just went ahead and finished cleaning a bunch of other equipment that needed to be cleaned so I could start doing maintenance on it. We're gonna start tearing into this thing to replace this fuel filter housing. First thing I got to do is remove the soft portion of the air intake here so I can get to it. Then we'll start taking apart these hard lines, get these taken off, and then pull that filter housing out. I didn't mention it yesterday, but this is a think it's a 96 long 2510 SDDTC. And what all of that means is that it's a I think it's Romanian knockoff of a Ford tractor of the same era. And the SDDTC part means that it is a manual shuttle for forward and reverse, four-wheel drive tractor. It's got a high-low 4-speed transmission in it, and then, you know, four-wheel drive. And I bought this tractor because I knew I was going to be working in conditions where I really did not want to tear up a nice enclosed cab tractor. Eventually I would like to have a nice enclosed cab tractor, but since I'm working in the woods and taking trees out, doing a bunch of clearing, brush hogging, that kind of stuff, I just didn't see any reason to have a $40,000-$50,000 tractor that I'd be replacing glass in about every 2 weeks. One of the things I don't like about this tractor is all of these fittings use crush washers, so you've got potentially 4 places for this thing to leak around this fitting on both ends. And the fuel filter itself is a cartridge type that uses an O-ring top and bottom, and then there's a cap that goes up in the bottom of it. So you got basically 4 places that it could leak on that filter, and every time you change the filters, that's exactly what happens. So, you know, ideally I would prefer a spin-on filter system and some kind of Boss fittings, but you know, it is what it is. I guess that this was a cheaper way to go because those types of fittings were definitely available when this tractor was built. I'm going to try to work in rubber gloves. I have usually found that they don't last very long, but we'll see. Just to try to keep the diesel and stuff off of my hands because they're already getting pretty torn up. And when I got this replacement filter housing, I went ahead and ordered a full set of crush washers to replace all of these, so we'll see how that works. Trying to get this done because we've got a pretty good storm supposed to come in after midnight tonight, and I've got a bunch of rocks on the side of the hill where we filled in that pond that I'm trying to get cleaned up so I can rake it across the hill and try to control the water. And once we get that done and I can get the rock moved, we'll throw out some old hay and try to get that seeded. And I'm gonna put in some swales, for lack of a better term, kind of permaculture style, to slow down the water coming off of the side of the hill. See if we can get it to soak in some. Unfortunately, that whole hillside is sitting on a bunch of shelf rock, and so the soil's only a couple of inches deep over most of it. That's on there pretty tight. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this or not, but there's that crack right there that was just steadily spraying diesel fuel everywhere. And there's the new filter housing. So we'll bolt her on and try to get this mess hooked back up, refill the filter, and to make getting this line back up and get these hard lines plumbed in easier, I'm gonna leave these bolts a little loose on the bracket so we got some play. I need 6 of these. And that's why I bought extra. And of course, these are a crazy size that you can't get at the local parts store. They've got some that are close, but they don't have them that are exactly the same. Try to clean some of the crud off of here. See if we can get this thing to seal up a little better. Since all of my tools are packed, I have no idea where my small wire brushes are. I mean, I do, they're somewhere in a box, but don't tell me that's a different size. Why is nothing ever simple? You order parts based on the model tractor you got, and the stuff is not the same. I swear to God, incompetence is just rampant. Keeping with tradition, that nothing's ever simple. I went to town about 50 miles round trip in an hour and a half, 2 hours, trying to find the right size bolts to fit these bosses. None available in town. So what I'm going to have to do is drill that out and tap it to fit the size bolts that I've got. So we're going to see if we can do this out here. Probably would have been better off to go to the shop and use a drill press, but we're going to use what we got. And you can see what I was talking about. There's a O-ring in the bottom of this cup, and then there's another one that's stuck to this filter right now, but it goes in the upper part of the housing, or the head, and provides ample opportunity for stuff to leak. what we ended up with was a 31/64 drill bit and a 14 by 1.5 metric tap. Now let's see if I can drill this hole straight. Just a little bit too small. That's far enough down in there. All right, I did a test fit. It looks like I got it deep enough. And we need it to screw in with about 2 threads left to show it. This will be a lot easier in a drill press. Try drilling it out to 7/16 first and then try this 31/64. Should be deep enough. Pretty sure I don't want that in the fuel system. So I really ought to be doing this with a bottoming tap to get all the way to the bottom, but they didn't have one. All they had was a starting tap with that long taper on the end of it. Well, technically, I guess it's not a starting tap. I forget what it's called. It's the one between a starting tap and a bottoming tap. Plug tap. Well, Let's try this whole mess again. See if we can get it installed and go on to the next part. Okay, it's back where we were before we were so rudely interrupted by others' incompetence. Like I said previously, I just don't understand how manufacturers and or distributors can tell you that parts go to a very specific piece of equipment and you get them and they don't fit. And it seems like this happens to me more and more. I don't know if people just don't give a damn or there's poor communication from one part of the supply chain to another or what. Almost like that YouTube or not YouTube, but website thereifixedit.com, where you can see people's failure to fix things. I don't know if there's really a good way to get these cameras positioned so y'all can see what's going on. Even though these crush washers are supposed to be a single-use item, I usually hang on to them because I have been out in the middle of the pasture and had something happen and not been able to get a new one, and dug the old one out and stuck it back on there and it worked fine. Highly recommend it. This is the Leatherman Wave. I've been carrying that and a pocket knife, and when I'm out, well, when I was deployed, I carried a Swiss Army knife Ranger model because it had a file on it that was hard enough to cut through a Series 200 American lock shackle. I've used those things for all kinds of stuff. We had a antenna that got run over and damaged, and I was able to use the Leatherman and the Swiss Army knife hacksaw to cut the bad sections out and put it back up and restore comms. Back in the 80s when we were driving militarized civilian pickup trucks like the Chevy Blazer and the Dodge trucks, they all had the same ignition on them, and we were coming back from an exercise in Germany, and I was supposed to load my APC on a train and then pick up a Cuck V, which was the Blazer version, and drive it back to our concern. And the guy that drove the truck normally had left with the keys in his pocket. So I had to cut the lock off with my Swiss Army knife, and then stopped another guy that was driving one of the trucks and had him take me into town to an Opel dealership and had him make me a copy of his key, and was able to go back, get the thing started, and drive back to post. And what was really funny is my buddy that had driven off with the keys in his pocket in another vehicle had been sent back out to get me, and about 3 hours later he showed up, not too happy that I wasn't there, and we couldn't get him on the radio to tell him I wasn't going to be there. And I was sitting in the enlisted club drinking beer when he showed up. Pretty funny. See if we can get that filled back up with fuel. Like I got a leak on my fuel pump, lift pump too. Good Lord, this thing. I think a lot of this problem is from this ultra low sulfur diesel. It is not anywhere near. Oh, guess that filled up quick. It does not lubricate near as well as the DF2 that these things were designed to run on. Well, something else to fix. We're supposed to get 50-mile-an-hour winds tonight and tomorrow. There we go. Just didn't want to suck anything down the intake track. It doesn't matter how much you clean on these things, they're still nasty. I'd have to disassemble the whole front of this tractor and spend about 3 or 4 hours pressure washing this thing to get it clean. I was just trying to get it clean enough so it'd be a little bit easier to work on. Let's see if it'll start. Seems like we might have sucked air in there. No, that's pressurized. Got fuel there. That lift pump's going to have to be replaced. Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, 100, 101, 102, 103, 104, 105, 106, 107, 108, 109, 110, 111, 112, 113, 114, 115, 116, 117, 118, 119, 120, My battery's dying. I have to make a mess. Crack the injector line, see if we can start getting fuel. That one's got fuel. North wind's blowing right in my face. Gonna have to put the battery charger on that and let it go. While we're waiting on the battery to charge, we're gonna go ahead and try to do some of this other stuff because I need to fix this exhaust gasket. Need to change the oil and the filters and replace the pre-cleaner on the air filter. So, and since this is a kludged up mess that was done by the previous owner, I think it's going to be fun trying to get the back nut off to get this head pipe loose, because normally this thing would be facing up and be coming out the top, so it'd be easier to get to all of it. But we got what we got. Of course, it doesn't really bother me too bad that the pipe's facing down, because my father-in-law's got the same tractor and two-wheel version you probably saw in some other videos, and with the pipe sticking up, it's constantly getting hit by tree limbs and stuff, and it ends up breaking the welds. And hit it hard enough you could break the manifold, but thankfully that hasn't happened yet. Looks like two of these three nuts are actually the correct thing. They're a brass nut, so they don't weld themselves to the stud. That is going to be a treat. It's one of those places you'd think a crowfoot wrench might be useful, but I don't think I could even get a crowfoot around this, because I'm having to use this stubby wrench basically vertical on the nut to turn it off of there. So what I was saying, I was having to use this thing on the nut like that, and I was getting about 1/6 of a turn, or one facet per time. Alright. There's your problem. So we're going to use to make this gasket, because I can't find a replacement that's factory made. It's just some Cometic high temperature, because it's rated up to 1200 degrees gasket material, and we'll seal it up with a gasket sealer. I'm going to do this on this end in case I end up hanging it back on the pegboard. lucky we had two corners of this triangle to use to make the pattern for the new gasket, because otherwise we would have had to use the flange on the head pipe. And to put these holes in here, it's just a hole punch. What we're using is 5/16, which I think is a little tight, but it'll hold the gasket up on the studs so we can get the head pipe put back up there. I'm marking up my tailgate. I should have used that other board there. Looks like it'll work. And you can do this without scissors or the hole punch or anything else if you got a ball peen hammer and what you're trying to make a gasket for, because you can take the hammer and tap around the mounting surface that you're trying to bake a gasket for and make the whole gasket. This is paper, I'm gonna give it a little more meat staying outside of this line. It's gonna be a little bit big, but I'd rather not tear the corners out putting it over the studs. That'll do. So this is the exhaust seal I was talking about. It's kind of like I guess it's a clay-based product that you put into the cracks. You put it in the joints if you got a slip fit, like you're putting a muffler in or something like that. A lot of the European cars use this kind of stuff from the factory. I don't know if it's the same thing, but test fit this. Make sure everything's gonna line up. And need to make those holes just a touch bigger. Of course, now we got the hurricane force winds. I think I mentioned earlier, I'm about tired of this wind. And I thought I was gonna have to make those holes bigger, but it's easier to make them bigger than it is to make them smaller. You make them too big to begin with, you gotta start over. There we go. I used some of this on the block off plate on my welding machine because you can put the exhaust out either side, and the side that faces the gas bottles I put a block off plate on and use this to seal it off. course. If I'd wanted something to go in that bucket, it would have never gone anywhere near it. Alright, we're getting squeeze out of that sealer, so hopefully our exhaust leak problem will be fixed. Okay, so I'm going to pull the drain plug. Let's see if I can not drop it in the bucket. Quite a bit of metal on that magnet. No big chunks, but there's quite a bit of metal in there. I've been concerned that this tractor is going to need to be rebuilt before too long, because it's getting a lot of blow by, burning a lot of oil, or using a lot of oil. I'm not too sure it's burning it. I would like for it to have been warm to do this, but I gotta have it running before I can make it warm, so do with what you got. I guess I let it drain long enough, it came out. 7.4 quarts. I mentioned these things when I did that dump truck video. These Joe's hand wipes. There's another brand called Mule Wipes. I usually keep them in the truck just for, you know, working on stuff out away from running water and everything. I think they're really handy. They're not cheap, and if you got, you know, lava soap or Dawn and water, it's a heck of a lot cheaper, but they're nice to have in the truck if you're away from water. Oh, pouring too fast. Touch over full, so once we get the filter filled up, it'll soak a little bit up and I'll be good. All right, next thing we need to change is the hydraulic filter. Have to get out the big channel locks. Now I know I didn't put that on that tight. That must be just the heat cycling has caused that. That hydraulic oil, I got some from the parts house and it was red, so it's kind of made my hydraulic oil look pink. It was supposed to be the same thing, so I guess other than the color. Well, that's about everything we can do. Put the air cleaner on. The reason I'm replacing this thing is that they apparently don't put any kind of UV protection in this plastic, and you can see it's fractured from the sun, but also because I caught a limb with it the other day, but it was pretty brittle from being out in the sun. That thing's only a couple of years old. That's what it's supposed to look like. And this better be the right thing. It looks like it's too dang tall. No, no, no. Well, what do you know? Just like the fuel filter housing, it's just a touch out of spec. And what I'm doing is going around this thing and opening it up just a little bit so it'll slide over and lock in and seal it, because for the pre-cleaner feature to work, you want it to draw air in the bottom of the hat, and it swirls around in there and the dust particles drop out before it goes to your main air cleaner. So I don't want it sucking air from the side, because it'll bypass the pre-filtering portion and go straight down into the air cleaner, which is fine. I mean, it'll still get filtered, but then you've got to clean your main air filter a lot more frequently. And since it's an oil bath, it makes a nasty muddy mess in that thing. Because when I bought this tractor, it didn't have the pre-cleaner on it, and it took me, well, I had to soak the dang thing in the parts washer overnight to get the main filter cleaned out of mud. And just like that. It wasn't off by much, just it was off by about half the thickness of the plastic. It was just enough it didn't want to go down in there. Alright, let's see if I can break that off the first day of using it. Well, let's see if we got enough of a charge on this thing to crank it enough to get it to start, because I need to move it out of my wife's parking spot. This mess I've made with the diesel fuel, I'll have to pressure wash the dang thing again before I put the side covers back on it, or it's going to be covered in dirt again. Seems to not have any leaks on the fuel filter. That lift pump's gonna have to be replaced. I got one on order. And it looks like we got our exhaust leak solved. So, get the lift pump in, get it put on, and this thing ought to be ready to go back to work. Last thing I need to do on this, other than at some point rebuild the injection pump, and depending on how bad the blow-by gets, rebuilding the motor, I need to replace that lift pump that you can probably see diesel fuel dripping off of. The gasket between the sections has gone bad, and you can't get parts to rebuild these things, or at least I haven't been able to find them. And so it's easier to just get a whole new lift pump. It wasn't expensive. I think it's about $30 or something like that, $37 on Amazon. And there's the part number and everything from where I ordered it. There's several different places you can get these, but Amazon was just easy. Okay, first thing we got to do is turn off the fuel flow coming from the fuel tank. There's a shutoff valve right here, and the hose comes down and feeds into this part of the pump, and then this section of the pump, or this line coming out of the pump, goes in through the filtration and into the injection pump. It's just my tractor is just a needle valve. You just turn it off. Of course, you got to remember to turn it back on because it doesn't run very long with the fuel shut off. Then we need to loosen off the fuel lines, and if you've got one of these tractors and you're working on it, that's a 17 millimeter. And then it's, if I remember right from doing this on my father-in-law's tractor here not too long ago, yeah, it's 13 that holds it on the side of the block. And there's two fasteners, studs, nuts that hold this thing on. I'd be willing to bet the way this is worn, this is the original lift pump from when this tractor was new. But that's what it looks like. And you can see where it's been riding on the cam, the eccentric. See how shiny it is? It's been in there a long time. And then that's your priming lever that picks up fuel coming in here, pushes it out here to prime the rest of the system. Well, that's interesting. This one has an O-ring. That one has a gasket that I'm gonna need to scrape off. And that arm that actuates the pump shaped differently on this one than it is on the old one. So we'll see if it's gonna work. It worked on my father-in-law's tractor. Try to clean that mess off. If I can get it in here. I'll spray a little carburetor cleaner on there and see if that'll soften that glue up. Oh yeah, it softened it right up. Bad thing about carburetor cleaner is it also softens paint up and will melt plastic if you're not careful. Since this is using an O-ring instead of a gasket, we really only need to be concerned about right around that opening so that the O-ring's got a good place to seal. I'll tighten that down a little bit because we're working against the spring pressure of the pump because of the location of the eccentric that drives the pump in its rotation cycle. It's up, so I'm pushing against it. I don't know if that's going to work because it's a little big. Well, we'll try it. I figure it's going to leak. But maybe not. Terrible fitting design. All right, we'll turn the fuel back on. Displace the air in that pump. Alright, because I really don't want to suck a bunch of air into that system and have to bleed the whole stupid thing again. And I'm going to reuse these, much as I don't want to. We'll see if it'll work. Turn the fuel back on again. Alright, so I'm going to start it, see if we got any leaks, and see if it'll work past the little bit of air that's in there without dying. Wish for the best. Well, I don't see any fuel pouring out anywhere, so that's a definite improvement over what it was. All right, folks, I think that wraps this up. I want to tell you thanks for hanging out with me and getting this project done. Hopefully you'll get some useful information out of this, especially if you've got one of these older tractors. Like I said earlier in the video, this is a Romanian-made tractor that's based off of a Ford design, but there's several different tractors that are the same tractor. They just got different color paint on it. It seems to me like there's the Long, there's an Oliver, a McCormick, and a Cockshutt or something like that, that are all basically the same tractor. So this will be applicable for any of those. So again, thanks for hanging out. Hope you enjoyed it, and y'all have a good day.